Well, hello there, all you amazing people, my bearded Sitsi. This is something that I am really interested in, and I've been doing it on and off over the years when I build computers myself, is that I tend to build big, then I go small, then I build big again, and then I go small. The last couple of times I've just stayed big for the win. But I do like smaller packages of computers because take less room. They're easier to hide if you want to hide them. And sometimes they fucking look better because you don't have, when I'm looking in my case, there's a lot of empty space around it. And it can look good and it can look bad. What you're sacrificing is airflow, of course. But I've always been fascinated with massive computer power in small packages. It sounds really like I could just hear all the dad jokes coming out.
Corsair in 2020. This was when it was impossible to get your hands on a 3000 series GPU, and it was the only way I could get a hold of a 3080. Since then, this PC has served me well, with no real complaints, except for one. It's massive. I mean, no doubt, the 4000D is a great case.
It's all about the D's, ladies.
I'm wanting to use it as a living room PC, and this is just not gonna fit. So that's where this comes in, an ITX case that can also fit full-sized ATX motherboards and other components. So Let's take it apart and see if we can downsize this PC without rebuying everything. Later on in the video, we'll talk about this video's sponsor, Squarespace, but for now, let's get started. Of course, the first thing I've got to do is take apart this pre-built. This config that I bought has an RTX 3080 and an Intel i9 10850K in a MSI ATX
That's actually still really good specs for today's world, to be honest.
Motherboard cooled by a 240mm AIO, along with 4 additional case fans. Now, those fans are not going to fit in the new RTX case, so I'm not going to worry about pulling those out right now. Removing the AIO is a little tricky here, as there are just a ton of wires for it because of the RGB. And I've got to give Corsair props. Their pre-built is really well put together and has great cable management. I kind of feel bad even taking it apart, but I want to give this PC new life, so I think it'll be worth it in the end. All right, the only component that I won't be able to transfer over is the power supply. Although the case
That's one thing that's gotten smaller over the years, is the power supply. I remember like way back in the day, if you wanted like a 1000-watt power supply, they were almost as big as the fucking case almost.
Using can support an ATX power supply, it can't accommodate both an ATX motherboard and an ATX power supply together. It just won't fit. Therefore, I'll leave those cables there for now and use it in a different build on another day. Okay, so the case that's going to make the conversion possible is the Sunny Side Up Meshroom S. This case has huge compatibility to the point
ladies. But yeah, it looks kind of neat. I kind of like it. I'm actually kind of debating if I should get that one.
Where it just feels like it shouldn't even be possible. Still, it should fit everything I have here. The side panels use these push pins, which are pretty tight the first time you pop them out, but you do want to be careful because these steel panels bend pretty easily. So what you can do is push from the inside to avoid bending the corners. I have accidentally bent them a few times and they can be bent back. But save yourself the headache and just try to be careful with them. To get this case ready, there are a few things that need to be removed first. So I'm going to take off the entire front panel. This will make it much easier to install that large motherboard. There are a ton of screws that keep this on.
And this is why people don't do these kind of builds here. It takes way more work. And I would dare to say, if you are a PC builder, it takes more skill to build in a smaller form factor. Because you need to understand how it's put together, you need to understand the dynamics of heat and stuff like that a little bit better, and you need to understand your components a lot better. Where if you have a big fucking square box, you can just throw everything in the box and then, yeah, that's okay, because it has enough room, there's enough, circulation of air and stuff like that you don't really have to think about much. Just put a couple of fans in there and...
I think I counted something like 16 or so you'll want to keep a container nearby to not lose these. I'm also going to remove the slot cover on the back, as I won't be using that either. Then the side fan bracket and the PCI Express riser cable. We're going to need a longer one for this build. Before we start putting this thing together, we need to install this PCI Express card bracket so that we can secure it with the new riser cable later, and then move the GPU stand toward the front of the case. We'll need to use 2 standoffs stacked in order to get the bracket at the correct height. All right, now we can finally start putting this thing together. And I'm going to start with the PCI Express riser cable. So this is a 38.5 centimeter cable, that should reach our PCI Express slot on the motherboard. Unfortunately, this is not the ideal orientation for the connector. Ideally, we'd have the cable going straight out towards the back of the case instead of the front. Then we could bend it 90 degrees and it could go through the pass and back up to the PCI Express slot. Unfortunately, I just have to wrap it around the right side. Not as good looking, but it'll work. Okay, there's one additional standoff that needs to be added to the bottom left to support the motherboard. Now let's slide the board through the front and align it with the standoffs. Now there's only 5 standoffs to secure it instead of the 9 you would typically find in an ATX.
That's also a thing that I see with the standoffs, and maybe going into controversial territories here. You don't really need all of them, especially if you're not moving your case around a lot and stuff like that. I have in the past hold ATX motherboards up with like 1 in each corner. Yeah, don't go and jank out graphic cards all the time, and when you do take stuff in and out of the board, you have to be aware of it flexing and stuff like that. But yeah, it's you don't need all of them. What they typically do is they help you, like I said, make sure that if you're moving it around, you're not damaging the motherboard, and if you take stuff in and out of the motherboard, that when you're checking out the graphic card or CPU or RAM and stuff like that, or coolers and stuff like that, that they put less stress on the motherboard.
Still, that should be plenty to keep the motherboard secured. Next up is the radiator. So let's flip the case over and install it at the right back position. We can feed the tubes and the water block through the top of the case and then secure the radiator to the right side bracket. This was a little bit tricky to work in, but once I had everything aligned, it was no problem securing it into place. While we're still on this side, we can install the 3080. And don't make the same mistake I made here. If you need to use the included 90-degree HDMI cable with your card, plug it in now before you secure it down. I had to take the whole thing apart after I shot this build so that I could plug it in because the HDMI port was blocked by a bracket. The card should slide right into the riser cable we installed earlier, and then we can secure it to the bracket with the 2 screws. Alright, let's finish the AIO installation, so I need to reinstall the 4 standoffs. Apply some thermal paste, and lower the water block onto the CPU. Whenever you're installing a water block, it's good to tighten the thumb nuts in an X pattern to get a nice even pressure across the CPU. My Corsair logo is upside down now, so I'm just gonna pop off the faceplate and flip that around as well. All right, things are really coming together now. So I'm going to install 1 fan bracket on the right side of the radiator to fully secure it. And there are just a ton of wires for this AIO. I'm not too worried about RGB for the radiator fans. I'm only gonna hook up the fan cables and tuck the RGB wires away for now. Then I'm going to plug in the USB for the AIO.
I would have done the same. I'm actually debating on getting an all-in-one cooler for my system here. I'm actually slimming down on LEDs. The only thing I have right now in my computer that's lighting up is my RAM sticks and the graphic card. Everything else is non-LED, and I kind of like it. That it's not, a fucking beacon of LEDs throwing, colors out into the room, even if it's one static color. And I do prefer, that's just me, I do prefer a build with tasteful LEDs versus everything has an LED. Because then it basically just becomes one big fucking light bulb, or a ray of whatever color that you're putting in there, or colors that you're putting in there.
One component that I'll need to buy for this build is an SFX power supply. Like I mentioned earlier, it can't support the ATX one from the pre-built alongside the ATX motherboard, so we need a smaller one. I'm going with a Corsair SF750, which should be more than enough for the system, and uses braided cables that will make cable management much easier. Let's lower this down to the bottom left side of the case and secure it with the 4 screws. Then plug in our giant 24-pin motherboard connector, and I'm just gonna kind of let this hang across the front. Then we'll need to plug in the CPU power cables, so I'll route those across the right side of the case. And while I'm here, I'll plug in that PCI Express.
Actually don't look that hard to build in. It really don't. I've seen cases that where the builder has well, they had to take it apart multiple times because it was so difficult. You have to do it in a specific order, and you have to swing the cat in a specific way over the build to place it with the dead cat guards and stuff like that. You seem to have a lot of room here. Like you can plug the things in more easily. You don't have to do this kind of thing here, now it's in, or take a screwdriver and twist your arm to get it in. Because it took the front panel off and these things off, it's more or less just, plug. And I like that.
Riser cable. And I'm really not happy with this cable. I really wish I had one that could go up from under the motherboard. It would just look so much better, but I'm just gonna have to make do with this one for now. And now we can plug in the 3080 with two 8-pin connectors. I'm actually able to wrap the cables around the side of the motherboard because the design of this board has a cutout that gives just enough room to close the front panel. If you're working with a different board, you may need to route them across the back. Then we can also plug in the SATA power for the AIO. Now let's reinstall the front panel, and this also has our USB-C and USB-A case cables attached. So once that's secured, we can plug those in across the right side of the board along with the power switch. And with everything now plugged in, we can pop the mesh side panel back onto the case, and that's the build complete.
Nice.
It's shocking how much can fit in this small 14.9 liter case.
Yeah. I will agree 100%. This looks fucking neat. And like I said, this picture here with the Dominator RAM, I think it is, and the cooler is the only thing that LED. To me, this looks amazing. Versus this one have LEDs here, LEDs all over the. You get what I'm saying here?
I was able to fit almost everything I needed from this massive 48.6 liter 4000D into a case that's nearly 70% smaller. The case fans couldn't make it over, and I needed a smaller power supply.
Wait. I actually think you could take this case and put it into this fucking hole here.
Smaller. The case fans couldn't make it over, and I needed a smaller power supply, but still, that's really impressive, and it's gonna give this PC new life. As for thermals and noise levels, CPU temps have slightly increased in the new case by maybe 3 or so degrees, and noise levels only increased by 2 or so decibels. Overall, pretty negligible and worth the trade-off in my opinion. There are definitely some compromises to consider as well though. Just because you can fit an ATX motherboard doesn't mean you get to utilize all the benefits that board offers.
Of course not.
The power supply is going to block the lower PCI Express ports and other connections on that side of the board. My pre-built used a PCI Express Wi-Fi adapter in one of those ports that I also was not able to bring over. Now, it's not a big deal for me because I plan to use Ethernet with this PC, but something you'll definitely want to keep in mind.
Also, a lot of higher end motherboards nowadays, they have Wi-Fi built in. So if you are going to think this way, go just buy a motherboard with Wi-Fi built in, and then my motherboard has Wi-Fi built in, and then just do it that way so you don't need that adapter card. But
if you were considering this, there's also the option to buy an extension bracket and aluminum feet so that the case can support a 360mm radiator if you need it. So I want to know what you think. If it was me and I was building an all-new system, then...
So yeah, let the chap stand up there. I like it. Like I said, again, look at it. Like, look at you have the ramps and you have that little square. This is so much more beautiful in my eyes than having, LEDs fucking attacking your sensibility. But I love these small form factors. I wish we would see more of them. It makes me kind of want to buy a new case and downscale my fucking computer, to be honest. And yeah, it's I wonder how expensive this fucking case is. Because I think this is one of those boutique high-end cases that cost a shit ton of money. He seems to understand what he's doing when he's building this computer, because a lot of people cannot build these small form factors because they don't really know what they're doing. And they don't think about everything because they don't have the skills or the knowledge, of course. And when I saw him building and thinking about, 2 steps ahead, yeah, he had the little issue with the graphic card and the HDMI cable. No one does anything perfectly all the time. But he thought about that. He didn't just thought about step 1. He was thinking about, okay, step 1 is connected to step 2, and step 2 is connected to step 3. But to get step 3 to work, it has to do something along the line of step 5, and he was thinking ahead all the time, which a lot of people don't tend to do, and then they get into a lot of issues where they have to rebuild or retake apart and redo and all that shit. And that just tells me that he actually knows what he's doing. He has an understanding of what he's doing, which you don't see much, sadly enough, on YouTube. So yeah, go check this video or this channel out and the video. See you later. Bye bye.